Everybody, this is me on the screen. It's Tuesday, 8 o'clock, April the 14th, the day before tax day. Hope you guys have all your tax stuff done. Hey, I want to let you guys know in the chat section, there's a link. There's a mini course that I've been working on. It's completely free. It's called How to Recover Your Invisible Tracks. It is a course. For example, here's why I created it. I had a guy call me one time and he said, I'm using some of the best triggers. I'm using, Superior Drummer, Slate Trigger. I'm using all this stuff and I've got great triggers, and I listen to the trigger and it sounds amazing. And I listen to my own drum that I'm triggering and it sounds better than what I've got. When I put it in the mix though, it sounds terrible. And I said, have you checked the phase? And he said, what's that? So I created this course called Recover Your Invisible Tracks because it is important. Phase is important. And I put a link in there. It's called MixCoach.com/invisible. And you'll be able to go through that free course. It will show you how to, I'll completely explain phase to you, why phase sounds so good one way and it sounds terrible the other way. And that is in the course. So check it out. The link is in the live chat, and I will paste it for everybody watching afterwards. I will paste it in the comments section. Okay. This morning, I've been going live every morning. Let's see how many people we have here. We have a few people on Facebook, some people on the YouTube page. Thank you for coming this morning. Hey, Steve Klein, how are you, sir? Fishers, Indiana. Central time zone. I used to be in the central time zone. Hey, Steve, we got Joe Carrell coming on this morning. So when he gets here, ask him a really, really hard question. Okay. He hasn't shown up yet in the green room. He's not hanging out in the green room or anything. I'm still waiting for him to show up. I think he's driving in, and traffic is probably really, really bad in Nashville right now. It's probably not. It's not bad here. It's the best I've ever seen traffic. Hey, man, Tommy Swindle is in the house. Good talking to you, man. Hey, Joe, webcam is fine. On your phone is just fine. Just, try to hold it as still as you can. And just hit that link I sent you this morning, and we'll get going. So, Joe, if you don't, most of you guys know Joe. If you're on MixCoach, you know that Joe created some really cool tutorials for us. He did the MixCoach Experience Weekend back in 2016. We went to Joe's studio, which was the old, seems like it was in the Sony building. No, it wasn't in the Sony building. That was another, studio. But Joe did, we did some tracking. We did some mixing. I see you, Joe. You gonna comb your hair? I'm just kidding. Okay. Hey, so Joe is here. We're going to talk to Joe this morning. So Joe, if you don't know him already, let me talk to you about him. Me and Joe work in Nashville, and Joe has to be one of the busiest guys in Nashville right now. I happened to see him when he was at the NAMM show in LA or in Orange County, and he was just killing it. I think he's still killing it. He's taken over a studio called Treasure Isle Studio, which is an iconic studio, probably one of the oldest studios in Nashville now. They're bulldozing studios like crazy, but Joe hung on to this one like a something. I'm sure he'll think of something to say. But anyway, I'm gonna roll this little bumper, and if I can find it, and we'll talk to Joe. Okay, here we go. What's up, Joe?
Oh, living the dream. How about you?
I love to hear it when your mouth moves and something comes out, and I haven't checked the mic. It's good.
Yeah. Hey, I apologize. When I got here, I seen that link said, use a laptop or a webcam. I'm like, oh my gosh, all I have is my phone.
No.
I thought, oh no.
No, it's good.
I'm going to leave him high and dry.
Actually, your phone is probably a better camera than the one on your computer. Mine is.
Oh, I guarantee it, especially since I don't have one on my computer.
Yeah.
So how are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
It's been too long. It's been too long.
I know. Are you still working 7, 8 days a week?
No, I'm down to 5 right now. The coronavirus has cut in, but that's probably good. I've had more time with my son, and stuff than probably what I needed, honestly.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm still having, one song here, one song there kind of stuff come through. I haven't had a weekday off yet, but we'll see how long that lasts. I'm
So
fingers are crossed. I don't like to sit at home on my couch, to be real honest. A couple of days of that is good, and then I'm ready to get to work.
Yeah, I understand. It seems like I've been pretty busy too, just doing different stuff. Our church kind of went all online, so and I'm learning a lot about video stuff. So, I mean, I've been learning about video stuff, but I'm learning even more. I edited a video last week. It's one of those virtual choir videos, which I've always been kind of fascinated with, how people can record something on their iPhone and then we sync it all together. And we did that this week. I may find a link and post it below, but I did a little video edit on that, me and a friend of mine, Rob Lyons. And but we just got people to sing on their iPhones, and it doesn't sound bad. I mean, no producing at all on my part. Just said, hey, sing this part, and they sung it. And I put a little high pass filter in there and carved out a little 200 and then put a lot of reverb on it. And
there you go. That's
reverb
cool.
Covers a multitude of sin, right?
Yeah. I mean, we're friends. Guys, that thing that blew up that David Wise and Garth Justice did.
Oh yeah,
blew just that. That's like in the 8 million view range now.
Oh really?
Something like that. It's insane. Absolutely.
Yeah, insane. That's cool. It's cool. Yeah, and I saw the video first, and then I thought Garth did this. That's awesome. He's a cool dude. He's got a studio at home too, right?
He does. Yeah, I think he's. I can't remember if he's in Antioch or Brentwood, but he's not far from, 20, 30 minutes from downtown. I think
he's in Brentwood. They're pretty close, right?
yeah, they are.
Yeah. Well, hey man, how has this COVID thing affected you? Besides, you're working like 23 hours a day, 5 days a week now.
Well,
I noticed you're at your studio.
Yeah, I am. I still. I mean, I can't work at home anymore. When I moved in here 2 years ago, almost exactly 2 years ago, maybe just a few. I celebrated, I think, my anniversary here just a couple of weeks ago, as a matter of fact. But once I moved into here, I just tore down the home thing. For a while, for several years of working on the row, I still had was able to set up my room at home. Just all I had to do was take my tower back and forth, and I had copies of the exact same speakers. I had the JBLs, I had the Yamahas, the same power amp. I mean, I could bounce between the two, and it worked great. But when I moved into this room, it was completely bare. I mean, there was no gear whatsoever, so I had to pretty much just invest everything into this room, and it's been kind of cool, the fact that I can't do anything at home. And now when you get a day off, it's actually a day off. Actually a day off.
Yeah.
But no, it's so far I've had I think I was keeping track. I had 18 days of cancellations so far. Wow. So yeah, it's affecting me. There's no doubt. But all you can do is just see what in this business is just see what trickles in from mix. Right, I got a song from Switzerland, a couple country things, from around town, just single song things, and some. Luckily, I had some albums and EPs and stuff, a few singles that were already on the books, that had to be closed out. So I've been, staying busy on that stuff so far. So it's shortened my days. I'm home for dinner a lot, stuff like that. Yeah.
I noticed that you've been writing some. I just noticed this Shadow Hills mastering thing that you did for. Let me see. For Plug-in Alliance. Let me put it in this link, and I'll share it, and we can talk about it. It was pretty cool.
I enjoyed that. I had never. I think in the past, anything that you see from me had always been an interview where other people transcribed what I was saying, took the whatever. I think that was the first time I ever sat down as a, quote unquote author and wrote a blog. So that was a new experience. It was fun. I kind of enjoyed it,
Yeah. Let's see. I was trying to find your article because I read some of it last night. You were breaking down this new Shadow Hills thing, and you it looks like you used it all over the place. You used it on vocals, used it on guitars and drums, and on the two bus.
Yeah. Okay. So a lot of those guys out there probably know what the Shadow Hills mastering compressor is. It's an iconic piece. It's very.
I've never used it.
I've only got to use the hardware one time. It's amazing. Literally, it's one of those, but it's very expensive, and it's like, gosh, I don't know, maybe 6 rack spaces deep. I think it weighs like 40 or 50 pounds. I don't know. It's just a behemoth, and so it's out, it's out of the ballpark for a lot of us. So Brainworks, came out with their cloned it, copied it, in the plugin world, and it was available in the on Universal Audio.
Look at that mug.
There, yeah, that guy came out. So Universal Audio and Plugin Alliance, of course, you could get it. And then for the Plugin Alliance only version, they just modeled a very rare unit that Vintage King promoted for Shadow Hills. It was exclusive to Vintage King, and I think there were only a few dozen maybe made, maybe 50. I can't remember. There was, it was just a short run thing. So they modeled that because it's different. It is. And so when it came out, they had they were the guys over at Plugin Alliance, some of their marketing team and stuff were fans of that show I had done in the mix for Warm Audio. And so they asked me to that's what led to this, actually. And they asked me to write that and gave me a copy of that software early, so I could kind of get my feet wet and feel it out. And
right.
But that, when you say I used it all over the place, that was a song I had already finished. One of their marketing guys at Plugin Alliance is absolutely in love with that album that you're seeing there. That girl El Sarah, something I think
there's a link at the bottom, I think, right?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of when that came out. I recorded it last summer, but I can't remember exactly when it released. It was some months later. But anyway, he's in love with that record. It's not rock. It's not Americana. Maybe Americana is a good word. I don't know. It's I think the closest thing that I would use nowadays as a reference is maybe Fleetwood Mac. Just really good American, storytelling. Like the lyrically, it's very deep. She's an artist's artist. Not only is she an incredible singer, but she writes all her own stuff exclusively. She doesn't do co-writes or any of that kind of stuff. And it's she says what she wants to say. And of course, you team her. You know how it works here. You team somebody like that up with a room full of the session all-star studs that we have here, and then you just get out of the way. That's a producer for that record. Hire the right people and get out of the way. It really did turn out really special. But anyway, I got sidetracked. He's a big fan of that record, so he asked me if I would consider writing that blog and using that.
Yeah,
since it's got real drums, real acoustic, real some of the songs have real mandolin and even though it's not country. But anyway, long story short, so that album was already done. So then I went in and just put it on my group masters and my stereo bus just to try it out and kind of see what I found. So that's that article just kind of resulted from really my first few days of playing with it. And it deserves all the press it's getting. It really is an amazing plugin, Kevin. Hope you've got a chance to try it out.
I have not, and I will. I noticed that there's a free version up there. You can try it for free. Yeah, I may do that because we're about to do some recording, some worship sets for our church, and Mark actually is one of the guys on the stream here. He's actually one of the guys that's helping record it. So when we mix it, I may have to download this and see what we think about it. I used to be crazy about the old Fairchild. And I remember when I first moved to Nashville in '96, I was obsessed with a Fairchild. It was an enigma. You could barely rent them. And I remember renting it one time and using it on everything. It was not a plug-in. I actually had to plug it into something and then print it and then plug it into something else.
Man, actually, I think the only time I ever get to use a real one was when I track at Ocean Way. I mean, you just don't see those things around here.
Yeah.
And you just don't. There's a handful of them around Nashville, of course. Next door to me, Blackbird, they probably have. Gosh, I bet they have 6 or 10 of them. But
he probably has every existing one.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Really?
But no, I'm a big fan of the Fairchild too. I still use it. Like the Universal Audio version of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's a great plug-in.
Let me ask you a question then, because I know my MixCoach nerds want to know this, and that includes me. If you only had one of these Shadow Hills, what would you put it on?
You know what? Lately, that's been drum bus.
Really?
Yeah. I really like. In fact, I don't want to give too much away, but I just finished a video for them. This blog went over really, really well. So they asked me to do when they announced the 9000J, they asked me to do a little video, just like a 10-minute thing showing the power of it. Mm-hmm. And I ran the drum bus at the end. I was showing the power of the 9000J, but then how, compressing across the drum group, how much of a difference that can make too. And I had the red one, the Class A one, set up across the drum bus, not using the optical circuit. Remember, Shadow Hills is actually 2 compressors in one. And a lot of people shy away from using it, even if they own it, like within a bundle of UAD plugins or Plugin Alliance, because it looks scary. I mean, there's a lot of knobs. There's a lot of knobs and it looks scary. But if you break it down, it's like, okay, there's an optical compressor that's basically, it's not an LA2A, but just think of it as an LA2A, just a couple knobs, no adjustable attack, no adjustable release. It's a true optical circuit doing what an optical circuit does. Right. Mm-hmm. So there's that little section on each, corner. You can't see both of my hands. Which hand is this one? Well, anyway, this is hard, man.
This is hard.
The top left and top right is an optical circuit. And then underneath that in the middle is a VCA circuit. Just think of it as a SSL compressor. A lot of the same attack and release settings even. Obviously it sounds different. It's got its own thing, but and then on the bottom, just think of it as, selecting your output transformer. So depending if you're pushing, more, unity or above signal out of it, you're going to get some saturation of that output transformer, and it's going to sound different depending on which source, transformer you choose. You got the iron, which, can't help itself. It's going to put just a little bit of girth in the bottom end. And then on the top end, you have nickel, which is a sweeter sounding. I think most of the people describe nickel as just a sweeter sounding, material for a transformer. And so it kind of glossens up the top end a little bit. It doesn't, when I say sweeter, that doesn't mean it's better at all. That's why they give you 3 different options. And that's kind of a Shadow Hills thing. Mm-hmm. Some of their not quite as expensive compressors and preamps and stuff, you've probably used them. They all have that output for, transformer thing. It's probably, nickel's probably the best one for guys to choose if they don't think they hear a difference, or if they don't understand or want to, it's like, okay, one thing at a time. I want to learn how to use a compressor. I'm scared of also bringing in an output transformer. Just put it on nickel and run,
Yeah.
But anyway, what I found out, Kevin, was that on the drum bus, I bypassed the optical circuit and just put in the VCA circuit, very similar to like you would an SSL. Mm-hmm. And since these drums, like I said, this was a mix that was already done. And so these drums had already had some transient shaping going on, along the way and whatnot. I had an API 2500 style compressor on the drum bus originally. And I put that Shadow Hills on there with the slowest attack possible, because I didn't want to affect the transient too much, mm-hmm. And the quickest release possible, just to bring up the sustain, just to see what it would do. And I was only getting 1 or 2. I think it was 1 dB of compression on the meter, but it was this audible, like, wow, the meat and potato parts of the drum kit, the bass drum, the snare drum and stuff, just got more important. Not necessarily louder, but more important and aggressive sounding, if that's a good word. And the sustain, the attack, after the initial hit of the snare drum and the ring of the snare drum, the ring of the tom toms and stuff like that got more noticeable too. It was just instant more good with only 1 dB meter moving. It's a special. I don't want it to turn into a commercial, but it's a really special plugin that I've started using a lot since I've got it.
I was talking to Chris Crunk last week. No, maybe it was Matt Butler, and he was talking about there was a plugin it's just a transformer plugin. Just runs stuff to the transformer. And you wouldn't think that just a piece of metal wrapped around in a circle, the type of material that's in it would change the sound that much, but I guess it does. I'll have to.
It absolutely does. I'm a huge Transformer fan. Like over
the
movie?
Years.
Yeah, exactly. I'm a robot in disguise. As I'm sure your listeners are all different age groups and experience levels and all that kind of stuff. And one thing that all your veterans, that are watching will adhere or attest to, that maybe some of your younger guys haven't figured out yet, but you will. Don't give up, guys. Is what we like in an audio circuit. It's like, okay, I've used that preamp and this preamp, and like there's 5 of them right here. I've used all of these, and why do I like when they all essentially do the same thing, right? They're just turning up, by a signal by 30 dB or 50 or whatever we have it set to. Why do I like that one so much more than that one? And vice versa. And one thing that I've always came, back to for me, that it was always the transformer. It was always not, a real high end transformer. It was a discrete, a class A or class AB discrete circuit. And it didn't even have to have a transformer on the output. It could maybe just input transformer. But, those names like API and Neve and stuff that are transformer based have just always been my favorite. The real clean stuff that is, chip based, that doesn't have a transformer, or sometimes they've even taken capacitors out of the signal, like SSL. I love SSL consoles for mixing, but when it comes to the mic pre, anything that's chip based, which is of course a lot easier to build and cheaper to manufacture, the tip 9 times out of 10 they don't do it for me. Even the real expensive ones like Grace and Millennia and stuff, and I know there are people that love those because they make their living in the fields where everything has to sound 100% natural, and that's what those do. It sounds exactly, it's colorless, but I like color. But it's because I'm always recording rhythm section, and vocals and drums, bass guitar, keys and stuff like that. So transformers are a big one for me. Yeah, in fact, I have a couple 8 channels of Neve over here. It's the warm audio version. The 1373. They have real high end Carrell transformers, made over in the UK. And I will stem my mixes out through those sometimes, just to hit the real transformers.
Wow. And what's the difference? Do you take the time to bust, every mix out, like what, drums, vocals, guitars, all that kind of stuff?
No, not every mix. It depends on the way. First of all, it depends on the budget, because it takes more time to do stuff like that. If it's like, one of those things where you're having to crank out a couple songs a day, for a whole week on a record, most of the time you don't have real time for that, because then, the more hardware you use, you can't do any offline bouncing. So that there's more hours added to the end of the project, just getting things to mastering and getting their instrumental tracks and their background vocal tracks and stuff to them. Plus, if they're going to, if it's something where I have to mix the whole record, let's say it's 10 songs or whatever, and then they're going to make their notes, you know what I mean? It's like, hey, can you turn this up, turn this down, and go, okay, now next song, turn this up, turn this down. The outboard thing gets really it gets a little difficult sometimes to deal with, because you're having to recall sometimes outboard settings and things like that. I love using my outboard, don't get me wrong, but that pretty much is for stuff where it's a one song a day and we're pounding it out. It's like, I'm going to send it to you. You let me know if there's any changes you want, and we're calling this thing done. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I love using real hardware when I can.
Right.
I think it depends on how well things are recorded, whether I would say it makes a difference or not, as far as like really noticeable sonic difference. But even if it's just for the sake, just humor me, guys, even if it's just for the sake of having more fun when you're working, because you're going through, I mean, that's real. That's a real thing, not to be overlooked.
Absolutely.
I got into the guitar pedal game over the last year, and reamping and stuff like that, on bass guitars. I absolutely love it. Picking a stomp box and going, it's like, oh, maybe this isn't the one. I'll try, if the Tube Screamer isn't working, I'll try the OCD, or if the OCD isn't working, I'll try the Nobles or whatever. That's fun. That's just good fun.
I was talking to Tommy yesterday, and we were talking about plugins and how it's a slippery slope when you start messing with plugins, and especially hardware, because it's so expensive. But sometimes when you're mixing a lot, you kind of get bored with what you're doing, because you've built this template, you've got this routine, and things are predictable. Things are you can tell what you're going to get, and you can actually do it fast, and that's what it takes to make a living doing it. But sometimes that gets boring, right?
Yes.
And I told Tommy, I said, what I used to do when I would get bored like that is I'd go get a plug-in.
Yeah,
and it would be the end all be all plug-in. It's like, I can't believe I've lived without this plug-in. And then, the next week it's like, I'm bored of this plug-in. I'm going to try another one.
Yeah,
so I'm sure it's kind of the same way. So I think you absolutely need to, you got to build a system, but then again, you kind of got to inject a catalyst for change too, But if you get your system too dialed in and you never change it, and you never try to improve it, in a few years, as your sound becomes a little bit more, a little dated,
Right. Yeah. We a note to your listeners, because of Kevin and I's background in the session world, we all know guys. We won't, because that'd be horribly rude. But we know guys who, early in our careers, were some of the guys played on some pretty big records and in the country music world, for example. But just like Kevin's saying, that pedal board was their pedal board. For eternity. Their playing styles, their sounds, whatever, never changed. And all of a sudden, you don't see them you just don't see them anymore. If you legacy projects here and there, you'll see them. I'm thinking of one guitar player comes to my mind instantly that through the 80s was on, so much, and by time the mid 90s rolled around, anytime when you did see him, which was only a couple times a year, when you did see him, it was always, bah humbug and woe is me, because no one's hiring me anymore. But everybody in the room knew why. He still sounded like it was 1985, even though it was 1995. He would never adapt. And there's we know of engineers in that same boat. So that's been a good lesson for me, watching musicians who fell off the radar because of not, trying to keep current, and engineers too. We've both known them that just don't jump on board. The work they're doing now sounds like the work they did 20 years ago, and they wonder why no one hires them. Because unless you're doing a legacy project, that's not the sound they're going after.
Right. One of the things that I used to work in Nashville, North Carolina, and it was some crazy talented people there that that come to Nashville and everything too. The biggest difference I noticed between the Asheville thing and the Nashville thing is that Asheville has the same pocket of musicians who do fantastic work. When you get to Nashville, it's like a competition all the time. You've even got, I noticed, in Nashville, even when I first got there, that even the musicians were bringing in their own mics, their own preamps. Everybody's kind of getting into their own thing. Everybody challenges everybody else. If you become complacent even for a minute, you'll find yourself, missing out on something just because so there's a fine line between establishing your routine and everything, and then being able to improve also. And then, and I think, I don't know, there's even probably another edge of there being an innovator of doing something different, thinking outside the box. So
right.
absolutely right.
What we do as mix engineers, it's a fine line between art and technical. You know what I mean? And a lot of us, and most of us know which personality type we are. A lot of us really lean firmly one or the other. And those technical guys, it's always about the tools that they're using, how many tools they own, always having the latest, changing things out constantly. And then you have, your art guys, which I lean much that way. And we are the ones that tend to get too stuck in using the same tools over and over, because like we get more motivated into like performing the mix, right? Putting volume swells into it, volume dips into it, how shaping transients to make the or changing a snare drum sample or something like that to make a certain type of emotional impact, not even a sonic impact. It's the way it's feeling. And most of us fall into two camps, although we really need to meet in the middle. When we sit down to work every day, it needs to be a 50-50, and being self-admitted the art guy. I a couple years ago, I got a record that I had mixed. Oh gosh, probably, Kevin, it may have been 10, 15 years ago, 12 years ago. I don't really remember, but this dates back about a year and a half, 2 years ago. I was asked to pull that album out of the archives, and a new artist was going to, who loved that album, was going to make an EP out of like 5 or 6 songs. And they had re-sang it, and they're like, hey, we got these vocals. We're going to give you the new vocals. Go back to the existing multi-tracks, and you can use, add these vocals to it. And we're going to redo this album under a new name, because it wasn't successful in its first generation under this other artist. It's like no one's heard it, even though it's great, right? So I was like, yeah, that's incredible, right? So I opened it up to mix it, and wondering, it's like, oh gosh, like that was so long ago. What plugins, where am I going to have to start? What level am I going to have to start from? Because this plugin has been retired, and this plugin has been retired, or whatever. And what I found out was that, oh my God, I'm almost, there were some, don't get me wrong, it's not that there were no differences, but it's like, that's almost still my freaking template. You know what I mean? It's like I haven't, I didn't necessarily feel like I was stale, but obviously I was, right? So that that triggered something right up here. It's like, I went through, and it was back then it was the Waves SSL was one of my most used tools, and it's still a good tool. I've replaced it since then with something I think's better, but it's still a great tool for you guys to have it. And because it's all about what you know. And I did make some EQ choices that were different, you know what I mean, or applied more or less compress. It's not that I printed the same mix that I already had, but it was enough of a visual, like proof to me that I'm stale, like I got to do something. And so that's when I started started diving into some other companies' products, like that's how I got hooked up with Plug-in Alliance in the first place. A couple friends of ours, I could say the names, and you're going to be like, oh, that guy, had been telling me, it's like, you got to try the Brainworks, SSL, like you're stuck on that, but you need to try this. And I kept putting it off because I didn't care about that. I cared about the art. It's like, that's I love tools, but that I've already got this one, and it's working great with me. And there's some merit to that. But when I tried it, I was like, daggone it, like all these months of this guy telling me, you just try this thing out, and I just blew it off. Sure enough, he was right, and it just opens the door to it opens the door to trying too much. Yeah, that's another danger. It's just, we get lost. All of a sudden, we're lost in the tools again, and not focusing on the art. But it's always a battle.
It's a fine line for sure.
It is.
Absolutely. You've kind of challenged me here because I'm one of those guys that's like, I think this is SSL compressor sounds fantastic. I've got a preset on it that sounds amazing on just about everything.
You talking about the
But
waves?
yeah, the Waves SSL,
Yeah,
it's
it's
fun.
good.
But you've challenged me to want to do that. I remember a story when I first got. It seems like it was the Waves, the CLA 2A and CL76 or whatever that is.
Right.
CLA 76, and then I also had the Bomb Factory, and then I had a Purple Audio, and they were all 1176s, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna see if there's any difference except for the color and maybe the size of it, and the mojo, see if there's any, no pun intended. So I put them all in the line there, and I set them up all exactly the same way, and I unbypassed one, and then I would go to the next one, and then I would go to the next one, and you know what? There was a difference.
Yeah.
I had a preference. I chose one over the other, and it was the best one. So I think you're right. I think I'm challenged here. I'm gonna definitely start experimenting with some different plugins. Hey,
That's what I did. Yeah, and I started just working them in more immediately. I did too many, and I had to slow down. I was like, okay, now I'm not. It's taken me an entire song, day to mix a song that I should have had done in 5 hours, and it's 9 hours. And I'm still, you know what I mean?
there's
Like, yeah,
there's days.
you have to introduce them. Make what if you buy a new bundle from Plugin Alliance or McDSP or Waves or whoever that you don't have now, maybe just work in one every week or two, just try
Yeah.
it. Don't get carried away.
Yeah, there's probably a good method for that. One of the things I recommend is like when it comes time to mix, you mix. When it on the days like right now with COVID-19 going on and people are staying at home, now is a perfect time to go.
It is.
What is the difference in these two SSL plugins? Let me figure it out. Let me find some great reverbs for my mixes. Let me dial in my template. Now's the time to do that because I have a feeling if we can get out of this thing pretty soon, I have a feeling that there's going to be a rush of people not only going to church and where I'm kind of plugged in right now, but also creating music with people, going to studios and collaborating and stuff like that. So take advantage of it now while you can. I mean, that would be my advice. Hey, Joe, I secretly behind your back went in there and I said, hey guys, we need to ask Joe some really hard questions, the ones that he'll scratch his head over. So I got a few.
Oh, great. As long as it's not politics.
Not politics or religion.
Oh my God, Facebook is wearing me out.
Okay, so you don't have to spend a ton of time on these, so don't feel like you need to elaborate too much. This can kind of be the batter's box thing too. Okay. So Mark Jacoby says, what's the fine line between a Joe Carrell sound and the sound that the producer or the artist wants?
Ooh, good question, Mark.
It is a good question.
Yeah, it is. Well, hopefully they're very similar because I hope that the producer hired me because he thinks I'm going to achieve the sound that he wants.
Mm-hmm.
But in broad scope, because I got asked this the other day and I thought it was a great question. I hope that I don't have. This is just going to be just the opposite of some of our superstar mixers, that we look up to, like CLA or whoever. But I hope I don't have too much of a Joe Carrell sound, to be real honest, because I work in so many different genres that I want it to be right. When I do a bluegrass song, I don't want it to sound as compressed as I just finished a rock record for a group called Them Dirty. It's an entirely different thing,
mm-hmm.
And I do pop, I do big orchestrated gospel stuff. I do such a wide variety that basically I hope that everything that I do sounds very genre appropriate, but also for within that genre, just very alive. I think that's a word that I like to use for my mixing approach, because I think I use less compression than some guys do, or if I'm trying to teach somebody or whatever, it's like, well, yeah, you saw this on the video of this guy, doing a clip for Mix with the Masters or Waves or whoever, but like that's just not me. I don't like when I listen to some of those guys' records. I love it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then when I try it in my own studio, it's just like I don't like it. It's not it. That's not me.
Right.
So I don't use a lot of compression. I mean, I do. I use a lot of compressors and stuff like that, but I don't feel like I'm overly heavy-handed with it because I want things to move. I want it to be alive. I want, at the end of the day, yes, it's all big and loud and punchy and all that kind of stuff. But if everything's at a consistent volume all the time, I'm bored to tears. I feel like it gets harsh and uninteresting.
Yeah.
And no matter what genre I work in, Mark, I want it to be specific to that genre. I want it to sound appropriate, but more importantly than that, I want it to be a lively version of that.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that answers his question.
Well, if I can just tag onto that, and then we'll move on to the next question. On MixCoach, I tell guys, and this is just my summation of it, that there are basically, in my mind, two styles of mixing. There's a trendy mixing, which is like whatever the latest super compressed sound or dry vocals or this kind of effect on the vocals or the auto tune thing or something like that. That's timeless. That comes and goes. And like right now, there are certain things that are more popular than there was, 5 years ago. That's trendy. Right. If you chase that, you're going to be that guy whose sound consistently changes. And then there's a timeless kind of music. And that's the kind of music that I love to mix because in the timeless kind of music, you like your bluegrass, your classical, your big orchestrated ballads even. What's another one? Bluegrass, a cappella even.
Traditional country.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, that has this sound that you can listen to a record from 50 years ago and you can listen to a record in 50 years. And the chances are it's the exact same instruments. They've been passed down from generation to generation and they don't need to sound any different than they do. They're 300-year-old violins that need to sound like a 300-year-old violin.
Yeah.
The only difference being, even the microphones are old, right? People grab those old vintage microphones and old preamps and stuff. So to me, that's the timeless thing. And you need to differentiate between the two because, if you, I love CLA's mixes too, but when you mix in with Michael Bublé, it's like, that's a timeless kind of music mixed by a trendy engineer. And the sound, and maybe the sound is something that's trendy. Maybe you mix these two things up. So anyway, that's kind of my thought on it.
Well, no, I'm not even going to say that. I'm going to talk. I was going to start talking about who I do or don't like that some of our the guys that get idolized, but I don't.
Well, that was in no way a slight to CLA because
no,
he's a king.
I feel you. I was getting ready to make my own comment.
Well, let's move on to another question because Richard Blythe has a two-part question. He says, on vocals, I have a Townsend Sphere mic, which I'm using right now these days too. It's pretty cool. While it sounds great on naturally warm vocals, I had a lot of issues with harsher female vocals. No male bias here. And then there's a second part. And I think this is a continuation. He said he's been told by a Nashville engineer that it's a critical thing to smooth out a harsh vocal is a good analog compressor. And I'm assuming that he means through an analog piece and not an analog simulation. Could I record with Townsend and route out to an analog compressor? I think that's all of his question. Sorry. Route out an analog compressor to an insert. Do you do that sort of thing? First of all, talk about harsh vocals, how you fix those. Have you ever used a Townsend mic? And how do you route? Do you route out to hardware equipment?
Yeah. I definitely choose a microphone like maybe something, let's just say something like a 47 or a 67 is your standard thing. Like a 67 is like kind of what I consider the most neutral of the vintage, tube mics or whatever. But let's say throw up something like a C12 or a newer 87 or a 251 or something with a singer that's naturally bright and harsh. It's gonna, because of that upper frequency lift, it's gonna magnify that and sound even sound worse. I got a feeling that might, because he says it sounds great on naturally warm people, maybe it's got a top end presence thing happening. So a lot of times what I do first is change the mic, but he may not have that option. It's like a 47, is very warm and adds thickness to somebody that's got a natural maybe lack down there. 49, a Neumann 49 or something that's patterned after that is a great choice for warming someone up. But yeah, there are compressors that do a fine job of doing, warming up a signal. Not all of them. Like I would stay away from an 1176, for example. I love 1176s, but in the scenario he's talking about, they kind of have this mid-forward thing. And I got a feeling that harshness that he's talking about would just be exaggerated, whether it's a blue stripe or a black. And, no matter what revision, it's probably going to be exaggerated somewhat. So I would lean more towards something tubey, like a LA2A. I recently, over the last year, acquired a Gates. It's a recreation of a Gates, stay level. Just for that reason, it's a very thick, warm compressor. Something else he can do is even change the preamps. Preamps have a big factor on it. If he's, like an API, for example, or something like that is a mid-forward thing. Like, so I would avoid that with an artist that's already got a mid-forward harsh kind of thing. And I would go to something that's darker, not necessarily darker, but fluffier, if that's what we want to call it, like a Neve, a 1073, something old Neve, not necessarily the newer Rupert Neve stuff, although that silk engaged factor or feature does. Have you tried that?
I have, yeah.
Rupert Neve, it does the thing. It really does. But yeah, I would. My first thoughts are to change some of the tools, but he may not have that ability.
Yeah.
If it's like, man, this is the locker I have. This is the preamp I have. I don't have $3,000 to go out and replace all this stuff in the mix phase. I've had great luck. I'm sorry, what was our friend's name? Richard, right? Richard.
Yeah, Richard Block.
I've had really good luck, Richard, using multi-band compression when I get vocals that are harsh. What I would call harsh, I use multi-band compression. And split it up in like 4 bands, let's say, and that band that's between like 1K and 8K, and have that kind of dipping a little bit, but not the bottom end won't be dipping. So by nature, since you're turning down that harshness, but not this, all of a sudden it's a tone change feature. You know what I mean? It's almost like a tilt EQ. All of a sudden, this stuff is lifted seemingly. And another really good tool I've used, Richard, is the Waves. What's it called? What's that compressor that's just a single band compressor?
Like the single knob stuff?
Is it the C1 Dynamic or something like that? I think they make like a C1 compressor, which is just a normal compressor.
C6?
No, it's not that multi-band. This is a single band.
Oh, got it.
This is a different tool. I think it's called maybe the C1 Dynamic or something like that. And think of it as kind of like a de-esser. And you can make this kind of a narrow band dip and put it in listen mode where all you're hearing is that that frequency, and you can find where that harshness is building up. On a female, it's probably going to be let's say it's 2,500 cycles. That's probably a good average, somewhere in there. You're going to find that if you have that thing when she's really getting belty and stuff, if it triggers just a couple dB, it's really going to smooth her out a lot too. So that way you don't have to change out your gear if you can't afford to, So that's just some cheap tools that you may already own, the multi-band compressors or.
I think that's cool. I had I talked to Matt Butler earlier this week, and he mentioned this plugin called Soothe, and then I noticed that Chris Crunk mentioned it too. That's another multi-band compressor that would probably help that. I got a quick little story about. So I'm working with Mark Jacoby on his some of his songwriting stuff. He writes. I think he writes a song every minute he's awake, because he writes a ton of them. But we were working on some stuff, and he brought his Townsend Labs. I think it's a Sphere. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mark. But what's funny is that he brought it in. We started using it. You have to record 2 tracks of it because you can actually control what kind of mic it is, and which even how you sing into the mic. So even if that doesn't work as a tool for being the mic, what I have found is that it teaches me. It gives you a huge mic closet to figure out which mic is. So you've got this Townsend mic that's probably $1,500, and then you sing into it, and you go through this $10,000 mic, this $5,000 mic, and you know which mic we found that sounds best on him? A $500 SM7. So
There you go.
yeah, so I would, Richard, I would probably I would experiment with those mics, find out which one sounds the best. And if you can, get your hands on one of those mics, or if you want to process it after, like Joe said, change the pre. You could change the compressor. You can actually do some multi-band compression afterwards. See what works on there, and just keep experimenting with that. So here's another couple of questions here. This looks like a good hard one. This is Craig Willoughby says, what mix process was the hardest to learn, and when did you know you had it figured out?
Ooh. That's a good question. I'm going to say compression, because I think our ears aren't naturally inclined to hear that as quick. We can hear a frequency boost. You know what I mean? Like if you turn 2 dB at 6K, like we can hear that, right? Or cut it or whatever. Of course, I mean, learning how all that overlaps with 36 instruments is a challenge in and of itself. But we can at least hear when the mud clears, or whatever. But compression, I think, I think that's the tough one. And when did I know that I had it figured out? Is that the last half of his question?
Yeah, I think he said, when did you know you had it figured out?
I still don't know.
I don't either.
I mean, I'm just being honest. Like I still don't.
I'm
know.
with you,
Like,
man.
Yeah, I mean, I've been doing this over 20 years and blah blah blah. And this credit and this credit. But don't get me wrong. I mean, that's partly a joke, but it's partly not, because we're always, I don't know, we're just always, I think, not evolving, but we're always evolving, but just kind of
learning.
Yeah, always learning. Yeah.
I'm with you. I think I forget who I said it, but somebody I respect. He said a mix is never done. You just run out of time. You run out of budget, you run out of time, and then you just learn from that. I think probably the most important thing you can do, Craig, if you're mixing, is just finish mixes, man, because you don't learn that much from a mix that you're still working on. You learn from it, to me, after it's done and you listen back to it, because you get so in the mud when you're on a mix and you don't know. I mean, your insecurities start playing in, and you're wondering if you're using the right 1176 or the right SSL plugin, or if you're doing this right at all. And you don't learn from that until you get later. So what I do when I'm mixing, and if I mix a 10-song record or a 5-song EP or something like that, is I just mix all 5 songs. It's game day. I don't mess with plugins. I go with my templates and I mix as fast as I can. I print them all. I drop them to Dropbox. I listen to them all back, and I go, which mix sounds the best to me? And then I'll use that mix as kind of a reference and say, well, if the snare was louder on this mix, it would be my template. And then I go back and adjust it until I run out of time. And then I call it done. And then I learn from that. Something similar to you?
Yeah. And another thing, I was thinking of while you said that, I mean, obviously, and I'm sure Craig's doing this, but when he says, when do you know you had it figured out? I think at any of the problems with mixing, any of the challenges of mixing, when you think you have it figured out is, obviously when your stuff starts to sound more like what you're hearing in your head and what you're hearing on the radio, like when you do compare it, to something that whoever, name their engineer has done. And it's like, yeah, I mean, maybe I'm not there yet overall, but I'm starting, I'm this sounds radically better than what I did 2 months ago or 6 months ago or whatever, or maybe not radically. It depends on what stage of their career they're in. But it's definitely a ladder to get to where you want to go. And as long as you continue to sound more like, those heroes and those reference mixes it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take years. I tell, I have kids come through here, not as much as I used to, honestly, but reasonably often, just to set in and observe, students of Belmont or MTSU or whatever, and for a day. And they're always, it seems like, taken back a little bit. I always let them know that, because they've got some of the same questions that you guys do. And it's like, I felt like I hit a different gear in year 15 of doing this full time year 15, not total year 15, but like doing this every day. For the most part, like at 15, all of a sudden I hit a whole new stride, a whole new zone. And that's not meant to scare them. It's like, oh my gosh, I've only been doing this 3 years. Like, I don't have 12 years. I'm not have 12 years to wait. Look at the bright side of it. It's like there's always, we're always going to be able to sink that jump shot from further away. It's just a little bit at a time, but we're going to get better at our craft. You know what I mean? And that's, enjoy where you're at now, knowing you're going to be better tomorrow.
Right. Okay, so here's another question. Steve Klein, and I put it up there so I wouldn't forget it because it's a great question, because I've been asked this too, and I'd love to get your opinion on it. As we add these compressors on buses and the 2-bus, are we limiting what a mastering engineer can do?
100%. 100%. If you're using compressors for more, on buses for dynamic control more than you are for color and like the enhancing attack, or or limiting attack, or increasing sustain, or whatever, you're using it for the wrong reasons. I would say just a little bit is okay, because that the way the compressor is working is what's creating the sound. I mean, we're being paid to get our sound and make what we think is a great mix. But yeah, I avoid limiting, for example, hard peak limiters like an LA2, an L2 from Waves or something like that. Even though I may use that kind of stuff on my stereo bus to print through that to send my client, because the client, I want them to hear something reasonably loud and reasonably radio ready or whatever, so when they hear it in their car, it's appropriate, or what they're expecting, I would say. But then I take that back off before it goes to mastering. And I never under any circumstances mix through that limiter. Do I ever use a peak limiter on certain individual sources here or there because something's just crazy transient rich or whatever? Absolutely. But on my stereo buses, it's saturation, it's Neve. I'm really partial to Neve transformers right now, either real or virtual. And then compressors that are either moving a couple dB or none. But for example, like let's say a 33609 Neve or 2254 Neve, they do something to the sound, so you can pass through them and gain it up, because as you gain it up, the circuit sounds different. And then let's say you gain it up 4 dB across your guitar bus, whatever. You may have to turn that guitar master down 4 dB to compensate for it. But those guitars summing together sound better than they did before because of what just passing through that circuit. It's not necessarily about the compression. You really can. You can really limit what a mastering engineer can do if you get too heavy-handed. But that doesn't mean you don't use what's right.
Yeah.
I don't want to scare you guys away from stereo bus or groups master compression, but just a couple dB.
Yeah. Well, here's my thought on that. And I've wrestled with this question before too. And I've asked a couple of mastering engineers, hey, do I need to take the compressor off? And they both told me the same thing. They said, who is this? No, I'm just, no, they both told me, don't undo what you're doing. Whatever you're doing, send it the way you're doing it. And then the last mastering engineer I went to, and in Nashville, it was kind of the biggest wake up call for me, because I realized that my mixes were a little bit inconsistent with the dynamic range. So when I started looking at that, my mixes would instantly become more consistent. And that was, he told me, he said, just make sure that, you don't peak over 0. Of course, that I can't take away distortion easily. Right. But your average level of your mix is too low. So bring your average level up. And then he was talking about RMS and forget what the technical term he used, but basically crest factor is what he said. And so what I started doing is started using K14 metering. And I figured out that if I can keep my dynamic range within 12 to 14 dB, The mastering engineer doesn't have to change your mix. What happens when a mastering engineer changes your mix is because you've got your average level is really low, your crest factor is really low, and your peak level is where the peak level is going to be at 0. And then what they have to do is they have to do something with these peaks. And as they pull them down and pull your average level up, it changes your sound. And then what happens is if you take all that stuff off, they still have to change the sound. So what I started doing is just being a little bit more strategic about how I'm kind of pre-master stuff, not taking any rights away from the mastering engineer, because we love for mastering guys to ride, but or to add to what we're doing. Which, by the way, if you don't have a mastering engineer that you know and trust, definitely find somebody, because don't just send it to any mastering engineer, because a lot of mastering engineers are kind of like frustrated recording engineers who just superimpose their opinion of what the mix should be over the top of yours. So don't go down that road. I've done that before too. Hey, Joe, I've got a couple of really quick questions. We're right at an hour, and I just wanted to make sure that Bolupona, yes, this will be available for replay on the Facebook page and the YouTube page. Let's see. I'm gonna get as many of these as I can. So what's Cuer Farrell, what is the most basic way to develop your workflow? I know every project is different, but are you mixing alone, or do you have minor edits that you have to do on the track? Just a real quick answer on that, Joe.
Oh, yeah. Sometimes you find yourself having to do edits, but for the most part, I want all the vocal tuning and all that kind of stuff done before it ever comes to me. Most of my editing is actually clip gain stuff to make the tracks more consistent, or put them in the sweet spot for your plugins. A lot of plugins nowadays need to see, are expecting to see -18 in our digital meters, because they're calibrated to that's analog 0, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm clip gaining things to where they hit like a sweet spot. But as far as developing your workflow, I think in the early days you just got to figure out, that if you're a top-down mixer or if you're a bottom-up mixer, do you start with the vocal first, or do you start with the drums? And Kevin will attest to this as much as anybody. You see some people really throw some strong opinions, and my opinion is that they're both right. Whatever works for that individual is what works for that individual, period. Right. Neither one of them are wrong. It's like, well, do I process through like some heavy-handed stereo bus stuff and then less on my individual tracks, or vice versa? Who cares? Yeah. I mean, at the end, as long as you're turning out a good mix at the end, your workflow, I think, would just be, trying a couple different things and seeing which one comes natural to you. Whether it's top down, bottom up, stereo bus, heavy handed, not handed. I would just see what speaks to you, because one of them's going to be right for you, and whichever one works best for you is right. Period.
Well, and I would say too, don't try to figure it out and then do it. Figure it out as you do it. Like I said, get some mixes done. You will figure it out, but it comes with it's a numbers game. You have to complete mixes.
It's a repetition. Repetition is huge to that friend. I don't remember what his name was, but to develop a workflow, you have to do it a lot. Yeah, and that's how you really know who you are, and what you become when you're really in this chair a lot of hours. Yeah. So find yourself some sample multi-tracks and just go.
Yeah. Joe, man, it's been awesome hanging out with you this morning. Thanks for the insight that you bring. Thanks for giving us your little time and your knowledge this morning. And
absolutely.
Glad I can call you a friend, man. And I'm proud of what you've been able to do in the last little while. Don't work too hard. All right.
All right, Kevin.
Take some time off.
Much love for you, brother.
Talk to you soon, buddy.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Hey, guys. That was Joe. Joe's awesome, right? Lots of good stuff. Thank you for interacting. Thanks for all the questions and stuff like that. Guys, I'm doing this every day. I'm at least until this COVID thing is done, I'm doing this every day. Tomorrow, check this out. Tomorrow, we've got Lucas Pimentel coming in. If you don't know who Lucas is, he's a very cool dude, and he is a mastering engineer. So we're going to ask him some questions here. I'm going to paste some stuff in the show notes here. this is where you can catch, and you can actually get a notification when we go live tomorrow, so you don't miss it. Joe is from Southern California. He's a mixing engineer, but he's also probably what he does mostly these days is master. So there is a link below for the YouTube page, and if you're on Facebook and would rather watch on Facebook, here is a link for that. Go to those links right now, and then just hit. I think what it says, notify me, or what does it say? It says get a reminder on Facebook, and it says remind me or something on. Anyway, go and check that out. It'll be good hanging out. Luke and I have been friends. We live close to the same, but he's one of those busy guys. It's kind of hard to pin down because he's so busy. But anyway, hey, I wanted to mention one more thing too. I have created a course. I'm going to type it while I'm talking. MixCoach.com/invisible. You need some help with your mixes, and you can't understand why things are disappearing. I'm going to show you ways to get your mix to pop a little bit more. I'm going to show you why some mixes just translate better. I'm going to show you why your samples that you're triggering actually make your mixes sound worse sometimes. And there's some secret sauce that I want to help you put on your mix. So go to that MixCoach.com/invisible, and there's all you need to do is click the link and go, and instructions will be there, and hopefully it'll help. Hey guys, I want to thank you so much for coming in. Thanks for my friends from MixCoach, Mark, Stephen, Chris, Craig, AJ, the producer. I want to thank, the list is long. Thank you for coming, and I will see you in the morning, okay? Take care.